Well, hello and welcome to this online virtual talk about counting sheep. The sheepfolds of the Lammermuirs. Sounds incredibly exciting, doesn't it? It's all part of the Archaeologists on Furlough project. I'll explain a little bit about that later. I'd just like to say thanks very much at the very start, though, for what East Lothian Council Archaeology Service have done by ensuring that the Archaeology Festival goes ahead. And they've been very brave in placing it all online and trusting us to deal with the technology. So thank you to them and thank you to you for turning up to this virtual talk. As I say, it's all about counting sheep, and I hope it won't put you to sleep. Well, I better introduce you to the team as well, the bar team. Oh, dearie me. Yes, it's these are the sheeple, and I promise that's the last sheep-related pun I will do. The people involved were Brittany, Lily, Cass, Gemma, Hanka, and myself, David Connolly. You might know me a wee bit. It was all coordinated by a guy called Rob Wiseman at Archaeology on Furlough, but I'll explain about that in the next slide. Anyway, we got together and put together a plan about how to examine the sheepfolds of the Lammermuirs. The Archaeology on Furlough project really stemmed out of the coronavirus pandemic, where it saw many of us locked down or self-isolating, but we still wanted to do something in archaeology just to keep our little grey cells going. Therefore, Rob came up with this idea that we could actually create a number of projects where we could get together virtually and look at what we could do over a variety of subjects. It was all going to be for professional archaeologists, for heritage professionals, for undergraduates, for postgraduates, and people who had a deeper interest within heritage and archaeology. As he said, COVID-19 doesn't mean archaeology has to stop. And the number of projects that were involved, I think, was about 13 or 14 of them, ranging from looking at digital recording to decoration and design and prehistory. Some really fascinating ones looking at the use of coal in Roman Britain. However, as I am a resident of this area and I'd often wandered, and still do, the Lammermuir Hills, I'd noticed so many sheepfolds, so many of them, and really it's like important to understand that the sheep were a key part of our heritage in this area. And so I'd always thought about doing something with it, as we always do. And here was the perfect opportunity to get some people together to look at the sheepfolds in the Lammermuirs. So, how were we going to do that? Well, of course, we were of one mind that what we were going to produce was going to be to a professional standard. And the most important thing was us to all meet up, and we used the Zoom platform to do that. Great platform to actually meet up and look your colleagues in the face. And in fact, it's very important to point out that the Archaeology and Furlough project was more than just actually producing great reports and data sets. It was actually all about well-being and the mental well-being of us. I know that for myself and many of us who have been isolated during lockdown, it was just absolutely amazing to meet up with other people and to talk with them. We all really look forward to getting together and talk about, yes, you guessed it, sheep and sheep-related fold topics. But it was exciting for us, and I think that's something to be said for the future, that just because you are miles away from everyone else does not mean that you can't be communicating and actually feeling better about yourself. Anyway, that's a slight digression, but an important one. What we decided to do was look at the landscape as a whole, and we defined the area which was the Lammermuirs, and that turned out to be, I think it was about 765 kilometre square, so quite a large space. What we decided to do was divide it into 10 kilometre areas, sort of 10 by 10 areas, subdivide these into 1 kilometre areas, and that allowed us to very carefully and methodically go through the landscape. We also came up with an Excel spreadsheet that we agreed about how we would actually go record the data itself, including how we would classify things, what information would be on it, things like place names or toponymic names. All this information we gathered together on Zoom, decided how we would go about it, realized we were all going to do it slightly differently. But the important thing at the end was to understand what would be the best way to do that, so that we could then pass on this information to others. So let's get to the nitty-gritty. How did we go about finding these sites? And so this was when the fun really started, because basically we would just go over our own designated areas, backwards and forwards, and probably start with a Google map going over it and seeing if we could see anything that looked vaguely sheepfoldy. It helped to go over then Bing Maps and see again if we could see anything sheepfoldy. I was lucky that I had the LiDAR as well. That was usually the last thing that I would do. We would also have, and this is where actually 2 screens came in really useful, we'd go back over the Ordnance Survey maps, the first edition and 1850s ones, and both the 6-inch and the 25-inch to have a look at what they had on their plans. They didn't have everything, of course, and so you had to actually choose from a variety of sources, and that's basically how we would take the data, the raw data of something that looked like it could be a sheepfold. We put it into the Excel spreadsheet and actually designate whether or not it came from a map, or whether it came from an aerial image, or whether it came from LiDAR, whether we were sure about it or unsure. Then we would cross-reference it with the HER, the Historic Environment Record, and in PassMap as well, just to make absolutely sure that we had covered all the bases. Once we had all that data, lots and lots of dots on our maps, and hundreds of records on the Excel spreadsheet, it was time to bring it together. And again, we're doing this with the Zoom meeting. Bring it together into typologies and relate it to work that had been done in the past on sheepfolds. And of course, this is when the fun really got to start going, because now we have the points on the map, we have the various sizes, materials and type of sheepfolds. We're actually able to then start looking at it and creating typologies. You can see that we actually got 1035 sites. Once we'd cleansed it, we had 860 sheepfolds or enclosures in the target area. By far the greatest number were the good old circular ones, come weighing in 290 of them across the whole area. Fascinating fact, but up until this point there was only 24 recorded across the Lammermuirs. So we've done well so far, and this is all getting handed to both East Lothian, Mid Lothian and the Scottish Borders HERs for them to be able to use with associated GIS. Now, did I say GIS? Let's have a look at what happens when we look at it on a map. And here's the bit that does it for me. Basically, once you have the typology sorted out, and this again was all done between us, and you're able to have the points on the map, then you can actually start interrogating the data, as they say. All these little pink dots, for example, are all the sheep houses. All the white circles are the circular sheep stalls that are made out of stone, while the green circles are all the ones that are made out of turf. You start to be able to see patterns. The same with things like the very unusual ones, the Y, X, C's and T-shaped stalls. They're sort of kind of like shelters really. They're all congregated down in the southeast corner of the area, as if this is a very specific regional type. So once we've got the data all collated, we're each able to then start interrogating it for each of our personal studies. And here's where we get to the part where I actually get quite excited. So going over my own area, I noticed that if there was ever ridge and furrow, wherever there was a circular stele, be it a stone one or a turf one, they always, that's 100% of the time, overlay the ridge and furrow. So this allowed us to start to say something about the landscape chronology itself. And this was something which really intrigued me, because looking at that landscape and at the agricultural features, you were able to start to view what is now a huge area of moorland, of upland landscape, and see a much more complicated and diverse archaeological area. So taking General Roy's map of the 1750s as an example, I've used it as a backdrop here. Here we see how he has actually captured that crucial point in the history of Scotland, if not Britain as a whole. The change from ridge and furrow medieval agriculture to the more modern enclosed four-field system. You can see how we have the rig still visible to the east of the map, on the right hand side of the map, extending deep into the Lammermuirs. You just don't really think about how much of that landscape was actually arable fields around now many lost farms, while to the west, in this case around the planned village of Gifford, we're seeing landowners move to a more enclosed field system. This is the agricultural revolution written onto the landscape of the Lammermuirs. The opportunity arises for us to really study a deep history of an area that has not been subject to modern agricultural practices. So what we have at this point in time, the later 18th century into the 19th century, is a fundamental shift in the use of the Lammermuirs. Rig and furrow stretched high up into the slopes, deep in the valleys, but it was inefficient. The new field systems are producing much more grain per acre. Thus marginal fields become abandoned. However, the area is briefly revitalized by what we call the Napoleonic rig cultivation. You'll recognize the difference between the medieval, the broad rig, because they're long, narrow and very straight rig. That helps to feed a demand for grain during the Napoleonic Wars and an increase in population. But soon they are abandoned once again, and the fields are resown with grass for grazing. Yes, you guessed it. We're seeing the rise in the superimposition of sheepfolds, sheep houses, sheep stalls, all part of the science of agriculture and animal husbandry. We're seeing the increase of the use of the land for sheep. Oh, there is so much more to be done here. I'm actually quite excited about it myself. However, others were interested in other things. And of course, while I was at that, Brittany and Lily were both engaged in some fabulous GIS work. The analysis of the data set suggested that the landscape's topography very much influenced the choice of location for sheepfolds within the Lammermuirs. This can be seen from the fact that there appears to have been very much a preference for building sheepfolds at elevations lower than 100 meters. There's a few outlying examples, but that just goes to prove the point that in the main, most of the sheepfolds are down the slope and nearer to the farms, with actually more complicated sheepfolds being very close to the farms indeed. It's possibly due to the fact that adverse weather conditions are more common at higher elevations. Perhaps shepherds don't like going out in a blizzard on the top of the Lammermuirs. I'm with them there. While other features required for sheep husbandry are also more likely to be found at lower levels. Indeed, it seems that there's a preference to being near both roadways and paths, with 56% of sheepfolds being near known tracks and routes. And of course, 36% of these sheepfolds are found next to water. This can be anything from actually needing to wash your sheep or to just basically water your livestock. Interestingly, wooded and plantation areas seem to stand out. Now, this is something that we spotted later on in it, but it does seem to be a correlation between woodland plantation and standing structures, with 28% of them being close by. So all these observable trends represented by this data suggest that accessibility to roads and paths is a dominant influence on sheepfold placement. I know it's been done already. The Drove Roads is a really important book. But there's much more to be done in looking at the relationship and all the factors and how they actually go together. And we're able to do that using GIS, and they've done amazing work in this result. Analysis also of proximal place name data yields significant results as well, with many of the toponyms that were recorded with each sheepfold being linked to the practice of sheep farming in the area. And of course, how could we not have place names? Well, Cass was desperately wanting to do this as her sort of side study. As I say, when we were recording all the sheepfolds in the Lammermuirs, each person went, I'd like to actually look a bit deeper at this. And she looked at all the place names, especially the ones which were related to sheep. Surprise, surprise. A good example, actually, which really has importance here, is wedder law, which actually comes from the Old English for ram, is a wedder. And so you're starting to see elements of Old English, Anglian, Anglo-Scandinavian within the landscape relating to sheep. This is a whole new area of research, which I think some people are conducting as we speak as well. If we look at the landscape of the Anglian period within the Lammermuirs, we know they're looking after sheep there. So what husbandry is happening and when is it happening? These little place name clues are helping. And my favourite, of course, is you'll see it everywhere, Shiel. Now, Shiel is a problematic name, but it means actually like a small house occupied by a shepherd, like shieling, shiel. You'll see it everywhere, absolutely everywhere. You've got Pen Shiel. In fact, you've got a medieval grange at Pen Shiel as well. You've got Hoprig Shiel. You've got Lucky Shiel. You've got and I've been up there, the incredibly cold and bleak Windy Shiel. And Banshiel, Bransley Shiel. A lot's not Mayshiel. What about Shielburn? My favourite, and which is this image as well, is Gamel Shiel. Gamel Shiel is actually a small castle which partly guarded the route through the Whitadder. When it gets ruined sometime in the early 17th century, late 16th century, the stone gets utilised, and now we know the chronology of it. The stone gets utilised to create a stone sheep stele. This is going to be happening post 1740s. It's probably going to be a later one because it's stone. So we're looking at a 19th century sheep stele, which has been created out of the ruins of a castle. But there had been sheep happening here before, because we've got the name Gamel Shiel. All fascinating. I think this is going to be a really exciting avenue for further research. And here is something a little different, as they say. Well, while we were searching for the sheepfolds of the Lammermuirs, we came across this. It was on a Bing map, a Bing aerial, and circled there is a strange feature. It's bisected by a 19th century field boundary, so it's pre-19th century. But what is it? Well, we'll zoom in. Well, here we are. I'll let you make your mind up. It could, of course, just be a coffee cup stain, but based upon its morphology and how it sits on the edge of a large drop, that's these trees going down to the right, it looks very much like a prehistoric fort with at least a couple of ditches surrounding it, and potentially some interior features as well. Early days yet. I'd hate to actually say what it is. I know one thing it isn't. It's not a sheepfold. But it'd be great to work with one of the archaeology companies and the locals to examine this one further. Of course, if the landowner is amenable. But it'd be great. This could be a brand new prehistoric fort. Exciting. But not as exciting as sheep and the things that it can tell us. Now, I don't think any of us would have ever have imagined just how many new and exciting avenues of research would have opened up from the simple act of counting sheepfolds. It's really been an eye-opener for all of us. And in fact, we've already got our eyes on lots of new work to do. Other people have done some amazing work in it in that area already. I mean, the one that really stands out is, you'll see it on the next page, History and Traditions of Sheep Farming in the Scottish Borders. It was done by Robson back in 1977. Don't think it's been bested, this thing. It's a remarkable 2 volumes PhD on exactly what it says on the tin. It's a great read. Everything you need to know is in there. We can take that and move that into the Lammermuirs. There's also a very nice project that was done across on the west coast, shepherding on Ardkinglass estate. That's been turned into a website. If you, again, it's on the next page, you'll get more information about that. This is something that maybe we can look forward to doing next year with the sheepfolds and the shepherding of the Lammermuirs. But one of the things, as I say, that we really noticed was the number of options for future research, professional research here, and also community involvement. We could really refine the typologies and chronologies, and also look at how all the different folds and enclosures fit into the shepherd's year. Now, that leads us to another important aspect, which is the oral histories of all the shepherds in that area. When I've been walking, I've talked to quite a few shepherds, and I really feel it would be worth our while talking and listening to the people who still work the land up there. Now, Haldane, of course, did an incredible work looking at the drove roads of the Lammermuirs and Scotland. This could be looked at again in more detail up in the Lammermuirs, because we've seen that there's a real connection between the farms, the farmsteads, the prehistoric landscape even, and of course the sheepfolds and enclosures of the Lammermuirs. That's going to be a really interesting look that we could do. Agricultural change as well. The change away from the rig and furrow to the grazing and the upland grazing as well, where we're looking at hill farming for maybe the last 2, maybe 3,000 years. GIS investigation of this landscape will be crucial as well. Collect the data, we can then start crunching it using these systems. And in fact, using systems and digital technologies and Google Earth and Excel and all these things will become a featured part of community archaeology in the future. I think as we learn how to open ourselves up to these technologies, we can then start training and teaching community groups to use them as well. Amazing what you're going to find. And of course, my one and only, my favourite, it's the place names and land use. That's going to be a really exciting part of it too, where if we understand the place names and their chronology of these place names, what else will we find? It just goes for me to be quiet and start counting sheep again. And thank you all for listening to this rather condensed talk on the sheepfolds of the Lammermuirs. And remember, next time you're out walking on the hills, have a look and realize just what information is held in these rather prosaic monuments. Thank you so much.